This
Okay.
meeting is being recorded.
So officially, this is a special topic for pre-prom substance abuse awareness being recorded. And we are having this topic because it is now, we are starting the celebratory months between April until June, where it's prom and graduation. And historically, according to the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration, 1 in 3 traffic fatalities from teenagers or teens are related to alcohol or any other kind of drug impairment substances. Which is why we have our special guest speakers today. They are from the estimable Montgomery County Police Department, Sergeant Cody Fields, Officer Kate Strnad, and Officer Addison White. And then from the Mothers Against Drunk Driving organization, it is Julia Halberstam, Program Specialist at MAD, and Jason Shand. So without further ado, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so Sergeant Cody Fields can start sharing his. He will be our first presenter, and he will give his presentation from MCPD, and then we will continue with presentation from MAD. So Sergeant Cody Fields, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. I'm just working through sharing the screen as we speak.
And while he waits, I also want to just welcome Ms. Julia Halberstam and Mr. Jason Shand. I apologize, I wasn't able to do that earlier, but welcome to the meeting and thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. And we are recording this meeting because we have parents who weren't able to come tonight because there is a senior night for various sports activities. So they want to see the presentation as well.
Now, Nadia, I'm having a little bit of an issue because it might be already recording that it's not letting my privacy start to do screen recording for the laptop.
Ah, okay. Are you able to share your screen at all?
No, it's not allowing me to do so due to some privacy. So I'm.
Ah, okay.
You might have to get permission for him to share his screen.
I'm not familiar with how to do that right now, but I have your presentation, Officer Sergeant Fields. Okay. I can share that.
If you don't mind, that would be just fine.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
No, you're fine. My apologies.
No problem at all.
Let's see here, bear with me all. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. And
fantastic.
Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Okay. So I'm hoping everybody can hear us. I'm Sergeant Cody Fields with Montgomery County Police Department. I'm joined here by Police Officer Kate Strnad and Police Officer Addison White. They both work for the Alcohol Initiative Unit for Montgomery County. And so the primary focus from the unit is for DUI enforcement. So our focus is to deter drunk driving, to deter driving high. And then ultimately that goal is to stop fatal crashes from happening as well. So we work a lot. We work fairly often. It's every Wednesday through Saturday and nighttime into the night to make sure that we can actually get the people who are driving drunk and protect people. So the reason that it's important to you guys is that alcohol and drugs are always present. People begin to experiment in high school. People begin to experiment potentially sooner than that, or maybe in college, but around the ages that your children might be, and especially in Clarksburg High School. So we're going to go through a couple of things about drinking in moderation, about using drugs, kind of the laws and how it applies to parents, children, and what we can expect. So what we come across a lot of the time is every person that we talk to, especially if they're drunk, when they're asked how much they've had to drink, it's always 2 beers or 2 drinks. And so what's important to know is what an actual drink constitutes. And so even if we are allowed to give our children and we allow them to try a beer, we want to know how that affects somebody and what that means. So for liquor, it's 1.5 ounces of liquor constitutes a drink. 5 fluid ounces of wine and 12 ounces of a regular beer, like a Miller Lite or a Bud Light, about 3.5% alcohol by volume. The reason that this matters is that there's a ton of craft beers out there. There's a ton of breweries. There's a ton of places that serve beer that are 12%. And so if the standard beer is 12 fluid ounces and it's 3.5% alcohol concentration, if you have a craft IPA that's significantly higher in alcohol concentration, it's the equivalent of having 2 or 3 drinks in that single beverage. So while your kids are allowed to have alcohol within your observation, within your home legally, if we allow them to have certain types of alcohol, it's going to be as if they're taking 3 drinks at the same time. And so those are the kind of things that eliminate the idea of moderation. Those are the kind of things that can lead to children drinking unsafe and lead to bad behavior. So next slide, please. So one of the biggest numbers that gets thrown around for DUI stuff, and I'm only going to focus on DUI stuff very briefly because I know Matt's coming in and they do a fantastic job about it, is that the 0.08 value is what makes somebody drunk. In the DUI realm, we don't need a 0.08 value or intoxication to prove that somebody's DUI. You can get convicted of it for being much less. It's about any sort of impairment. And so just a single drink, and again, reference back to the other slide, a single drink of about 1.5 ounces of alcohol, generally for a 200-pound male, is approximately a 0.02 BAC, a breath alcohol content or a blood alcohol content, a 0.02. I'm not 200 pounds. That means if I have a shot, if I have a beer, if I have something to that extent, I'm generally going to be a little bit higher than that 0.02 BAC. And already just having that one single drink, it means that there's a decline in visual functions, inability to perform divided attention tasks, and then a loss of judgment. And so that's, again, just from having a drink or maybe a little bit less. If your children are pouring drinks at prom or at home or anything like that, they're not measuring how much a shot and a half is going to be or 1.5 ounces. Even at a bar, for any of the parents, if somebody goes, if your bartender gets tipped, if they give you more than that 1.5 ounces, if they fill your wine glass a little bit higher than they're supposed to, we thank them. But that means that we're not getting exactly what one drink means. Like they're getting $1 or $2 extra out of a tip, or the kids are filling the cup because that's what looks good, or if it tastes like Coke and soda, hey, they're doing wrong. But if we do it that way, we have to understand what the implications are and how it affects the body, because alcohol is not an immediate reaction time. So the second we have that alcohol, that consumption, we don't then experience the effects. It catches up to us. So at a 0.05, approximately 2 drinks for somebody who's about 200 pounds in a male, reduced coordination, the ability to track moving objects, difficulty steering, and slow response to situations. After just having one drink, there's loss of judgment. So that inner voice that tells a child or a young adult that they should not be doing something is now hushed. And so a young adult who might make some questionable decisions already because they don't necessarily know better yet, now has a little bit more of a push to do so after consuming some alcohol. And then there's substantial impairment that goes the more and more somebody drinks. You can go on. So I'm going to move this on to Officer Strnad. So she's going to talk about a little bit of the hospital facts, and then we're going to come back.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so these are the most recent stats that we have. I believe they're from 2019 or 2020, but these are the most recent ones that we have. So these come from Suburban Hospital down there in Bethesda. So for their yearly average, people that were over 21 years of age that were coming into the ER for alcohol-related issues, whether it was, alcohol poisoning, they've passed out at a party or anything like that, and somebody had called 911 for them. The average BAC that they had for people that were over 21 coming in was a 0.17. All right, so you're over twice the legal limit, and that's for people of age. So again, they're allowed to drink. However, they are, at least twice the legal limit. So that's pretty high. And kind of referring back to Sergeant Fields' notes about how much alcohol that actually is, because you figure one average drink, the 1.5 ounces, the 5 ounces of wine or the 1 12-ounce beer that's at 3.5%, that takes a lot to get up there. So that's a lot of drinks for somebody. For the people that are under 21, the average we saw Suburban Hospital saw coming in were a 0.24. All right, so significantly higher, yet these are people that should not have alcohol in their system at all. And they seem to be averaging higher than people that should be drinking or are allowed to drink. And also too, for Suburban Hospital, on average, they did see 3 juveniles per week come into the hospital with an average BAC of a 0.30 plus. Okay, so that's like your alcohol poisoning levels. That's, they're vomiting, they're passing out. It can affect their breathing. Typically, like when they're consuming so much alcohol, this is what happens. You got to watch for when these kids go to these parties or anything like that. And like Sergeant Field said, they're pouring their own drinks. They're drinking some of these heavier like alcohol percentage beers, such as the IPAs, and even like glasses of wine. 5 ounces of wine may be different for a child versus an adult. So that's something that really needs to be paid attention to. And you can click to the next slide.
I saw a hand raised briefly. If there are any questions, if you don't mind typing them into the side, we'll absolutely get to them as soon as possible, but we're only given a couple minutes for each.
The other one, real quick, there's approximately 189,000 ER visits for people under 21 for those alcohol related issues. Again, that's, we'll see with like the alcohol poisoning, you'll see some kids, they'll come in, they're vomiting, there's nausea, vomiting, confusion. Sometimes they can have seizures. That's something that you can see in kids. The slow breathing, trying to think what else. I think I said on the passing out. I believe that's about it. So these are some signs that, for the younger kids out there, these proms that are coming up, there's, I'm sure, parties that are going to be going on. So these are some of the clues you might want to key in on for kids that you see, like if they come home and they're vomiting or they're, very lethargic and they're very tired. Any irregular breathing that you might notice, if they seem really confused. These are some things that you might want to look for, because if they come home and they're doing these types of things, you might want to consider maybe, oh, they've had too much to drink. Oh, perfect. Okay. So alcohol poisoning symptoms, again, the confusion, vomiting, seizures, the slow breathing, irregular breathing, pale skin or blue tinge to it, almost like because they're not getting enough oxygen. So the skin will start to turn like a blue or a purple, low body temperatures. So you'll see, that's that hypothermic state that will come in, and passing out. So typically not always the sleeping it off. That's not a viable response here. Okay, these are people that, these are symptoms where if you notice any of these things, that's somebody that needs to go to the ER and they're going to need some medical attention. So these are some of the things you want to look at for kids when they come in. So, and I think you can go to the next one.
Yep, and I'll take it from here. Please for the next couple. So hi, Addison White with same thing, alcohol unit here. So the next couple, I'm just going to kind of go over the penalties here. So I got the mean slide. I guess you want to look at it like that. So for underage drinking here, this is for the possession of alcohol for somebody that's under 21. So if we, heaven forbid, get called to one of these parties, or we get called to something or actually have to take action, these are some of the laws or things that you'll probably see that could take an effect. So for somebody that's under 21, you can see on here a person underage with it, possessing, so having it somehow in their presence. The penalty for them is going to be about $500 or $1,000, the maximum. And then we just wanted to put the little side note in there for possession. So possession in the law constitutes as knowledge of the alcohol actually being present. So constructive possession, knowing that it's around, even if they're in another room, but they know it's in that other room, they're still considered being in possession of that. And then reality, so we want to put that in there, what's really going to happen if, say, a kid or one of your kids under 21 gets hit with one of these. The first time they're going to be seen, which is called, we have it abbreviated here, but it's a substance abuse screening for adolescents. That's what the SCA means. So basically, it's a government-run thing, but they're going to be going to a screening process, and they're going to be seeing what type of help or what be done to make sure this doesn't happen for a kid again. Second offense, kind of the same thing, and also there's another separate from our court system called teen court or juvenile court. So it's still in the court buildings, but it's a separate place within the buildings where we send a lot of our juveniles that go to these. And then if it heaven forbids get to a third offense, Department of Juvenile Services would get involved here. You can go to the next slide. So the next one, so this one is for more adults, not your person under 21. Yep, for furnishing alcohol to somebody that's under 21. So usually the adults or whoever's house it's at, the parents know they're giving the alcohol to somebody that's under 21. And I just want to make a quick note on here, we didn't put it on here. We're not talking about with your kid in your residence under your consent. We're talking about to other people's kids, or you're throwing a big party and you're serving it out to whoever. So we're not talking about the legal side of doing this. We're talking about, you know, throwing big parties and everything. So if you're giving alcohol to somebody that's under 21, so the law says allowing somebody under 21 to possess alcohol, you can see the penalty for that, and it's a criminal penalty. It isn't under going to be juvenile services or a civil. This is a criminal penalty. It's going to be $2,500 for the first offense, and it could be all the way up to $5,000 for a maximum. And then we like to go to reality, what your probably would actually see. If somebody did get charged with this, or like when we go to these parties and the person who's actually furnishing all this, what usually happens, depending on the circumstance, how many people are involved, how many had to go to the hospital, all that. Community service could be doing, parenting classes put on by the state saying they have to go to these things. Otherwise, there could be additional fines, jail time, monetary fines, or probation. Probation is kind of with that jail time I was talking about. You can go to the next slide.
Just one thing to caveat, if I may, about the previous slide. So if you don't mind going back. So while it's $2,500 for the first offense, it's $5,000 for every additional offense after that. So that means if it's a party of 10 juvenile people consuming alcohol and the parent or the older brother, older sister provided the alcohol, for the first person there that's drinking illegally underage is $2,500. For the other 9 people that are there, it's an extra $5,000 each. So when we run these underage drinking parties, the parents, the people who are meant to be supervising, who are furnishing the alcohol and providing it, are sometimes racked with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of citations for it because of the extent of it, because this applies to every single individual that's there. And so, as Officer White mentioned, the reality is, yes, the parent's not going to have to pay $200,000 or $300,000 for a larger drinking party, but just seeing that being written down and having to face that in court and having that over somebody's head is a huge deterrent, and that's something that's seriously needs to be considered. So it's not a benefit to be the quote unquote cool parent, to be the one who's providing alcohol to everybody else, because there are serious ramifications.
Yep, good. And yeah, I haven't failed to mention that, but yes, good point. And then the last one here, it's very similar. The wording you'll see is very similar to the other one. It's another criminal charge under here. And it's allowing a person under 21 to consume or possess an alcoholic beverage in the curtilage of residence. That means on the property, within those property bounds. That's what curtilage means, in case anyone's wondering. Same thing, the penalties are about the same, 25 and 5,000. I feel like we hit everything pretty well there, unless you had something else you wanted to add with that, Sergeant.
I do not.
Okay. Yep. And then you can move on to the next slide.
I was in the middle of typing it, so I'm going to address the question that was in there before going on. The alcohol unit is not the only unit that handles underage drinking party and responsibilities, but generally the alcohol unit, which consists of 7 officers for the entire county, generally responsible for up to about 10 different parties that include citations for the parents. So not every single instance of running an underage drinking party results in any sort of charges. Our primary focus is to make sure that people get out of there safely, make sure that the students and the children get home safely, and they're not, running away from the police, they're not freezing outside or drowning or anything like that. But I don't have an exact number to the amount of people that have been charged in the county. One of the most important things that Maryland has done, though, because we do understand that alcohol can cause addiction, alcohol can cause overdoses, and alcohol can cause alcohol poisoning. Other drugs can cause serious instances as well of overdoses. The biggest one that everybody knows is opiate overdoses, heroin overdoses, things like that. It generally doesn't seep into the schools as much as it could, which is fantastic. That's always a good thing. But overdoses can occur. And especially if it's somebody's first time trying something, generally their body doesn't have a tolerance to it. And that's when they're more likely to have an overdose to any sort of substance, alcohol included. What Maryland's done is they've enacted the Good Samaritan law. So a problem that the nation has had is, especially in these drug overdoses, is if an individual is overdosing on a drug, people will run away, they'll leave, they won't call the police because they don't want to get caught. They don't want to be implicated in a crime. So what this means is that if you, a person, a student, your child calls the police because somebody else is having a medical emergency, that person who calls the police or attempts to give aid cannot be charged criminally, cannot be charged at all. It's in order to save lives here. And this is one of the biggest things that I want you guys to push to your families, to your students, to anybody that you can, because if they call the police for fire rescue services or police services, it protects the person that's having a medical issue, and it protects the person that's calling, anybody else that's trying to help from any sort of penalties. Now, it's not a cover-all. It doesn't apply to felonies or distribution of drugs or anything crazy that might stem from it. It's not a get out of jail free card for crazy offenses, but it protects the kids who are going to be doing childlike things, which is maybe experimenting in alcohol. And continue on. So this is one of the big things too, especially because the legislature is changing. Senate Bill 1 for next year, that's going to take place July 2023, is the legalization of marijuana over the age of 21. Right now, marijuana is still illegal. What Maryland has done though, is it's made a quantity restriction. So it's made it a civil offense. So nobody's going to be jailed for having a small amount of marijuana. What it means is if you have anything less than 10 grams, it's a $50 civil citation for an adult. If you're younger than 21 years old, it's a must appear citation, meaning that that individual, that student has to go to court. But what this means is that if it's anything over 10 grams, it's still criminal. A person still can be arrested, put in handcuffs, and taken to jail. So if it's less than 10 grams for an adult, it's a $50 civil citation. If it's more than 10 grams, it's still up to $1,000 and or 6 months in jail. That's not what's going to happen because the courts understand that their marijuana is not what it used to be, or isn't treated the same way that it has been used to be. Sorry, that wasn't a good sentence. Isn't treated the same way that it has in the past. But what's important to note is that marijuana has changed drastically and it still does pose a threat. So while Matt's going to talk to you guys about driving under the influence of alcohol, driving while high is still a serious threat that's facing Montgomery County. One of the things that I do is I work for the fatal crash reconstruction unit as well. And we've found that in about 40% of our fatal crashes, marijuana has been present. Now, because some of the people have been deceased, it's not to say that marijuana has been the critical factor in causing the crash, but it's been present in about 40% of the cases. And so that means that there has to be something leading towards it. And there shows that marijuana is still causing some crashes. Marijuana is still illegal federally as well. So it's a cash only service in Maryland. If somebody wants to work for the federal government, they cannot use marijuana and it's still illegal. Marijuana as well has been changing throughout the years. And so while in my parents' generation, it used to be something to the equivalent of like a Miller Lite for beer. So like 10% THC volume. Because of this legalization across the nation and in different places, it's becoming 40% THC by volume, 80%. And so while it's incredibly volatile, it's incredibly strong. So depending on what types of marijuana people are using, they might be expecting one effect and getting an absolute opposite. And so the effect could be, what many people in this genre may have experienced before, being something mild or something just from smoking marijuana briefly. But as the result of, let's say, an edible, for example, which is incredibly concentrated in a lot of THC value, it has a wide varying effect. It takes a while to set in, and then it sets in all at once. So it would be the equivalent of expecting to drink one beer, having an IPA, and getting hit with 4 different beers at the same time for the equivalent of marijuana. And marijuana can be addictive, and marijuana is something that people can use as a gateway drug still. One of the things that we want to throw in here too is because a lot of people think it's just marijuana, we wanted to throw out that, again, the courts have even backed the fact that decriminalization is not the same thing as legalization. Just because it's decriminalized means that people aren't going to jail, but it means that it's still completely illegal as a whole. There's nothing about it that you shouldn't be able to possess. Even if you have a medical card for marijuana, it's not a medical prescription, it's a medical certificate saying that marijuana, you are allowed to have it. So the students that are potentially experimenting with marijuana, one of the biggest things you want them to understand is that not all of it's the same. The edibles do take a strong concentrated value of it, and there's the potential to overdose and get hurt taking some of the edibles because yes, it's taking it all at once. And so it's a conversation worth having as the parents and as faculty or anything like that to think about, understanding the differences in the types and the effects that these things can cause. One of the last things we want to touch on, And this hasn't been something that we've been finding incredibly prevalent in a lot of the schools lately. If you guys have any other information about this, please let us know. But prescription drug abuse has always been a thing. It's just not nearly as prevalent as we've expected. And so as people become prescribed drugs, even myself, I will take maybe one of the two of the painkillers if I hurt my back that I'm prescribed, and the rest of them kind of sit vacant in the thing. Children like to make money. Children like to do things. And sometimes children sell leftover drugs or prescription things like that to friends. Even just using somebody else's prescription that doesn't belong to them can have serious medical implications for themselves and serious physical ones. We make a lot of arrests for people that are driving under the influence of a substance, a DUI, for legal prescribed medication when they're not taking it as prescribed. So one of the things that is important is understanding that even though there might still be pain after the fact, it's not worth taking more than one or more than you're actually prescribed, because it can affect your ability to drive a vehicle safely. It can affect your ability to function safely, and that it can have long-term lasting medical effects. If you guys have your children that have these things prescribed to them, just keep it kind of monitored and understand some of these things have addictive qualities to them, and just make sure you're checking in with your children. That's all I have for this. I want to open up to a lot of questions because there are things that I think are important to you, to everybody here, that we might not be able to guess at.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant Fields. Thank you, Police Officer Strnad, and thank you, Police Officer White. And question and answer will be after the MAT presentation. So I'm just going to stop my screen share here. And thank you so very much for your great presentation there. And I'm going now to open the floor to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Ms. Julia Halberstam, and Mr. Jason Shan. So Ms. Julia, you have the floor there, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having us tonight. I'm just going to do something quick because I think Jason's story is incredible and he has so much to talk about, so I don't want to take too much of his time. I do want to let you know just a little bit about MAD and about our program that we have here at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and some statistics that we have between underage drinking, and actually we have statistics from the COVID time. I mean, it's still continuing on, but as many of you know, MAD works tirelessly in the community in support of our mission to stop drunk driving victims of the violent crime and prevent underage drinking. In the state of Maryland, 142 people were tragically and unnecessarily killed in alcohol-related crashes in 2020, and over 20,000 Maryland drivers were arrested for DUI and DWI. I know Mr. Fields says that we were basically for drunk driving. We actually are now drug driving as well. We do have some victims that are from drug driving, but ending drunk driving begins with preventing underage drinking. And then we know that our hope for a safer future is riding on tomorrow's drivers. By getting today's youth off to a good start, we're taking a giant step forward for our vision of a nation without drunk driving. That's why we're focused on tackling underage drinking and a problem that threatens the safety of our kids and endangers entire communities now and down the road. MAD's number one concern is ending drunk driving. So what does that have to do with underage drinking? Underage drivers are overrepresented in number of alcohol-related crashes yearly. The elimination of underage drinking would eliminate those needless crimes. Additionally, teen drinkers have a higher likelihood to become addicted to alcohol and more likely to choose to drive drunk later in life. Some statistics that we have found is that teen drinking kills about 4,300 people each year. That is more than illegal drugs combined. 1/3 of teen deaths, including alcohol, is a result of underage drinking. 1 in 4 crashes with teenagers involved underage drinking. Teens who start drinking at age 15 and 16 are 6 times more likely to become alcohol dependent than adults who started after the age 21. So I also just wanted, because we just recently got these. So for COVID had a significant impact on drunk driving statistics. Although drunk driving rates decreased in 2019, since the pandemic. Drunk driving fatalities actually increased 5% from the same period in 2019, although total miles traveled decreased by 14.5%. Fatalities increased rate from 1.10 to 1.35 in 2020. Before the pandemic in 2020, it was found that 19% of drivers had a BCA or BAC over the legal limit. By the summer of 2021, 26% of the drivers had a BAC over 0.08. So we just kind of make some of the choices that you make today will affect you for the rest of your lives. And we just kind of want to make that known, is that just because you, I understand it's a mistake, they say, but it does not just only impact you, your community, everyone around you is impacted by this. And I just want to introduce Jason. He's going to speak a little bit about his brother. So Jason, you can take the floor.
Hi. Yeah, so my name is Jason Chan. I work as a victim impact panel speaker for MAD, meaning that normally each month I speak to a room full of people that have been convicted of DUI or for drinking or drugs. I mention that just because in those meetings I do have, I help with the registration, and I often have kids in the victim impact panel meetings that are 16, 17, 18 years old, which is just saddens me every time it happens. But the reason I'm here is to tell you a little bit about my brother, and then to tell you about how he died. So my brother his name is Brian. He's 2 years older than me. When we were growing up, my mom used to call me his shadow, because she used to say if you were actually looking for me, you just had to find Brian, because I would be somewhere like running around right after him. So kind of looked up to him my whole life. And so Brian was born September 2nd, and I'm a March baby. But the only reason I mention that is that kind of the way the school works, the way that turns over, is even though he's 2 years older than me, he actually was just a year ahead of me in school for most of our life. We grew up in a small town in rural Texas, town where there's not a whole lot to do, just a small little college town. Maybe my high school graduating class was like 73 people. But when I was in 7th grade and Brian was in 8th grade, the school decided that they were going to bump me up to 9th grade when we finished that year. So all of a sudden his baby brother was in the same class as him. I feel like most older siblings wouldn't be huge fans of that. But he kind of took me under his wing, tried to like tell people I was cool at least. But I played sports, so kind of got by that. But we played all the same sports together. He was always faster, which is really unfair. But I like to blame that on the age thing. But anyway, we're close friends throughout high school. And then when we graduated, he went to the University of Mississippi, and I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, just kind of the schools we chose for ourselves. Every spring break, every summer, we kind of spent together. He graduated in April, I graduated in May, and as soon as he literally took a flight to Michigan right after I graduated, and I drove the truck and he drove the U-Haul down right behind me, to move back in to place in Texas together. So being young guys, living in Texas, we kind of both finding our own paths, and we're living in Austin, Texas. And Brian decided that he wanted to start a construction company and move back to our hometown of Rockdale, Texas. So I decided to take a job in Washington, D.C. and move. I ended up moving to Baltimore because it was a little bit cheaper to find a place in Baltimore than it was in Washington, D.C. at that point in time. So this is in the very beginning of 2009. Still talked all the time to catch up, that sort of thing. And well, he called me, I guess it would have been like April or May after moving here, and told me that he had met a girl, and her name was Jenny. And he was absolutely crazy about her. and was already thinking about getting married and all that fun stuff. And about 2 months later, I guess it would be in about September of that year, he called me and told me that they were engaged. And not only were they engaged, but she was pregnant. He was super excited to be a dad. Couldn't have been more pumped. Was just kind of one of those guys that was kind of always meant to be a dad. Was really looking forward to it. So he called me about a month after that on October the 2nd of 2009. And he was calling me because his college roommate, Jake, was moving to DC. He just got a job with the federal government. And he was moving to DC, and Brian wanted to make sure that I had all of Jake's contact information so that Jake wasn't moving here not knowing anybody. Just kind of the way that he was. Just want to make sure he wasn't alone being here. So we start talking about what's going on in life and stuff like that. And he tells me that they're going to a concert that night. He and about 5 friends that I had known for a very long time. And so they're going to a concert in Austin, and then coming home to like a pasture party at a camp house to kind of spend the night and kind of party and all that kind of stuff. They had a designated driver who was going to be driving Brian's car because he had a Tahoe and could fit everybody in it. So kind of talked about catching up and all that kind of stuff, and you know, said our goodbyes and hung up. I hung out with some friends in Baltimore that night, came home, I don't know, sometime around midnight or something like that. And I woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning to my phone. I'm sure everybody has a smartphone these days, but smartphone was face up, and it was basically it was over on my dresser, and it was lighting up the entire room, as your phone would do when it rings and it's got a full screen. So kind of wakes me up. I see it, start to get over, and then it hangs up, and I started to go back to bed, honestly. And then it lit up again. And so I went over to grab it, and it said mom. When I went to pick it up, it hung up for some reason. And I went to call her back, and she was calling again. So I answered it, and she's on the other end, and she just says, "Brian's dead and you need to come home." And I'm kind of confused. And she just repeated herself, said, "Brian's dead and you need to come home." And she started sobbing, and she hung up the phone. I just started throwing stuff in a bag, threw a suit in a bag, threw some clothes in a bag. I didn't even know what I was grabbing. And I just walked out of my house in Fed Hill and took a cab to the airport. Got there, went to the Southwest counter. I remember them being incredibly nice and trying to get me out of there as quickly as possible, but the next flight wasn't for hours. So get my flight, go to a gate, and then I just sit there and trying to understand how this happened. So I realized that I knew people that he was going to the party with. So I kind of got filled in. They went to the concert all together. Everybody had a blast. The designated driver was the designated driver. They went there, had a good time. They went back to the camp to all hang out. Once they're back to the camp, everybody's supposed to crash. So even the designated driver started drinking because he was planning on staying there that night. So they all started drinking quite a bit. Some of them I just kind of turned into a big party type of thing. And he around some point during the night, Jenny called Brian and asked when he was coming home. And Brian, I don't know that plan with her in advance, but Brian basically told her that he was going to stay. And she got incredibly upset that she was in her first trimester pregnant. She was really sick. She just wanted him there and didn't understand why he couldn't come home. Now, for some context, Brian lived, it's a road called 908 in Texas, country road. There is no police presence. I wish there was more of one, but it's one of those things that if he hops on this road, he's not going to see a cop on the way home. Brian lived on 908 on one end, where the camp house was at another spot on 908. So he'd be driving on one road, driving 4 miles. So he asked somebody for his keys. They were like, dude, nobody's going anywhere. All his friends were like, we're all staying here. Nobody's leaving. And sometime shortly thereafter, I guess with everybody drinking and things like that, Brian snuck into the designated driver's bag and took his keys. And before anybody knew what was happening, he was tearing down the driveway out of there, leaving. When I was told this, when we were kids, there's this little part on 908 where the road goes like this. And being dumb teenagers as we were, we used to call it straightening the curve. And we would drive straight to where you're kind of going over the yellow lines on both sides, because I don't know, because we were dumb kids and we thought we could go faster. But when I heard what road it happened on, I kind of could see it before I ever got there. When I flew to Texas, the first thing I wanted to do was have somebody take me right there. So that's where we went. And right where I saw it happening on the phone is exactly where it happened. He was straightening the curve and another car happened to be coming. In order to avoid that car, he cut to the right. His wheel went off the road. They believe he had a blowout then because of the marks coming back across the road. He tried to regain control, didn't. He ended up going off the left side of the road. Car flipped 6 times. He flew out the driver's side window because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, smashed his head against a tree, and he died on impact. He was about a mile away from home when that happened. So I talked to my brother on a Friday, and then on the following Tuesday, I was a pallbearer at his funeral. So the fallout of this is my parents had never been the same, ever. Used to be kind of a social family, have parties, have things like that. Haven't done that ever since. Every holiday is not the same. It's very, very small. They kind of don't really talk about them anymore. Well, they talk about him, but not around those times, not around his birthday, not around October the 3rd. They just kind of shut down. And then it just gets more complicated. On a side note, he had a company. I ended up leaving DC. I took a leave of absence from work and worked to shut down his company. Had to subcontract out the work, tried to find, he had 34 employees. I tried to find every single one of them a new job. Some I could, some I couldn't. Brian was bilingual. And so a lot of his employees were Spanish, and some of them only spoke Spanish, and finding them work was really, really tough. So their families were out, and then it's one of those things like Brian paid well, couldn't find them comparable salaries. It was just it's really tough. And then on May 5th, 2010, Addie was born. She is an absolutely beautiful little girl. She looks exactly like him. She also has a bit of his attitude somehow that passed through. So when she was born, as she got older, she looks more and more like him. Like, she has his facial expressions. And Jenny has always blamed herself for him dying. And she started to have some issues herself and decided that she could no longer raise her. So she gave up custody of Addie to my parents. she has visitation rights. Jenny hasn't seen Addie in, I think, about 7 years. So my parents, who are now, my mom will be 70 in October. That'll be 73. They have a 12-year-old that they'll 12 in a couple weeks here, that they raise. She's had a lot of problems with school, with attachment type stuff. She goes to sees a therapist regularly. The kids at school, she's gone to a couple different schools, because the kids at school, when they learn that her dad died and her mom is in her life, kids being kids, call her the orphan or some version thereof. And my mom hates it so much, so my mom just keeps on pulling her out of school. I am her godfather. I am Uncle Jason. I try to be in her life as much as possible. We talk pretty regularly. I help her with homework because my 7-year-old parents don't really understand algebra anymore. So we go over homework and things like that. And then I just try to tell her about her dad, about kind of the type of person that he was, and some stories from us growing up together and stuff like that. And then what started happening in the last couple of years is she just says, Uncle Jason, you've told me that already. Uncle Jason, do you have any new ones? You've told me that already. And while I grant there are some that I can tell her when she's a bit older, for the most part, those stories are just running out because his story ended. So the reason I work for MAD is for Addie. I try to remember my brother, but it's, as you can tell, I've been worried for MAD for a while. It doesn't get a whole lot easier to tell. I try to do it to remember for her and talk about him best I can. And the thing I like to talk to people about, and I talk to kids, I've talked to things like this before, is that, like, it's you got to have a plan when you go out. But then, as I believe it was Officer White or Officer Fields mentioned, that your judgment starts to become impaired as soon as you start drinking. And so, like, my brother wasn't intending to drive that night, and then he did. So it's, you just, in these days with Uber and Lyft and things like that, it's kind of, there's no excuses really anymore. And I think that, when it comes to kids, I mean, it's talking to them about having a plan. I mean, you want them to abstain, obviously, but talking to them about having a plan. And I mean, some of the kids that I talk to at the impact panel meetings talk about, like, I talked to a distinct conversation I remember having with a little girl who was 16, and she said, I just knew my dad would kill me. And I was like, don't you think you'd be a whole lot happier that you're here? So one of the things I talk to people about is, I'm like, call your mom, call your dad, call your ex-girlfriend, call anybody. Just don't get behind the wheel. Especially in this instance with prom. I mean, it's the number of people that were dependent on my brother that he had no idea about until after he was gone. And then that empty seat at Christmas or Thanksgiving or everything, I think about my brother's death just about every single day. And kids need to realize that it's not something that I know that most teenagers only think about the here and now, but those decisions are going to last forever, even if they make the fatal mistake and are no longer here. It's going to affect everybody, from their siblings to their parents to their friends, for the rest of their lives. So that's kind of my thing. Thank you for having me, and I'll turn it back over to Nadia.
I don't know how to. I'm just I'm at a loss for words. I just want to say I thank you so very much for your strength and your courage, and then your willingness to share your brother's story to everybody, to the community, and how you see that it can have a positive impact somehow from the tragedy that your family experienced. And I am so sorry, and my condolences for his passing. And again, I thank you. I thank everybody here who is here, especially our wonderful guest speakers. Like, we cannot thank you enough. This is kind of last minute of sorts, and I hope that next year we're able to have a bigger one actually at the school with the juniors and the seniors for next year. But yeah, I'm going to open the floor for discussion. I feel a lot of people may have a lot of questions that they have kept and they want to share. If anybody want to share a few words, you are more than welcome to do so now. You can unmute yourself, raise your hand, and yeah, just share anything that is in your mind. And again, thank you again, Mr. Shands, Ms. Julia, Officer Strnad, Officer White, and Sergeant Fields for coming in and presenting on this very important subject. I am going to open up the floor.
I'm finding it hard to find the raising my hand. Can I just
Yes,
make
that's
a comment?
fine. Thank you, Bushra.
Yes, I just wanted to thank him so much for sharing such a personal story, and it's just leaving me and my kids speechless. So my son is 19 and my daughter is 15 almost. So they were not interested in attending the PTSA meeting today, but they heard your story and they stayed at the table. So it definitely touched them, and they listened to the whole thing. And I just have a lot of respect for you and your family, and just lots of prayers that you find the strength to heal. And thank you so much for coming out and having the courage to share this story with us.
Welcome. Thank you.
I don't know if you saw the chat, Jason, but Kristen Devine states that she thanks you for your willingness to share and discuss the extended impact these things have on everyone in people's lives. My condolences and thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, either for our wonderful officers and sergeant from MCPD or for the MAD organization, Julia Halberstam and Jason Shand?
I would like to get some more information about the MAD organization.
Yeah, so I actually have a virtual flyer that I can send to Nadia that we created actually. So it actually has a little QR code on it now. It's actually brand new. We haven't really released it yet, but we just got the okay today to send it out. So now we can have it on the phones instead of just the brochures that we normally give out. So we're more than happy to send that over to her to send out to you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Of course.
So I had a question for Matt specifically. In the state of Maryland, there was one particular lawyer who kept getting elected to the state legislature who would prevent any stern drunken driving rules. He basically just gave everybody a slap on the wrist because he was defending a lot of drunk drivers. It was his job in life. Has this changed for Maryland? Do we actually have strict rules?
Well, unfortunately, no. We actually just went to Annapolis. I think I went last week and the week before. No, just one time, sorry. We tried to pass a Noah's Law. It's loophole. It's Bill 653 to like kind of patch up some of the loopholes that we have. It's unfortunately, it did not pass this year, but we're going to still continue to fight for it. And this is kind of fill up the loopholes that no law have, where we're making sure that they have interlocks in vehicles. But unfortunately, we didn't, like I said, we haven't been able to get a pass, and we're trying. We're out there all the time. We're trying to lobby as much as we can, but what we need is just the support of all of you guys. So we're trying, unfortunately.
In the state of Maryland, from what I remember, you can decline the breathalyzer, therefore it can't be used against you.
Yeah, so that's kind of some of the loopholes that we have. Don't quote me on some of this stuff because I'm just learning some of it. But I know that we passed Noah's Law, which you have 6 months of an interlock. But because of these loopholes that were added last minute, it prevents that. It's kind of based on judge's discretion, or there's little holes that they can have where they don't have the interlock. So we're trying to fill those holes where it doesn't matter what it is, they automatically get it. But that's what we got declined this year. So we're slowly trying to, and I'm sure one of the officers can help me more on that.
Yes. So we're finding that most convictions, more often than not, are not resulting in an interlock. And that's in the courthouse for the reason that most judges are giving probation before judgment. And so while that goes in favor to the defendant and it gives them kind of a slap on the wrist, it no longer counts as a conviction as far as Noah's Law goes.
Exactly.
And so Noah's Law is only as effective as we can actually get a conviction on paper for.
Correct. So if they were charged criminally for it, when we can get their interlock in there, is that correct, Mr. Fields?
So no, it's beyond charging. It's just if they're actually convicted in court.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't,
No,
I mean,
that's okay.
I meant charged as convicted. I'm sorry.
Yes.
That was a bad word for it.
No problem.
If they were convicted.
So in the state of Maryland, really, there is no penalty for drunk driving and killing someone at this point.
I had court this morning for a first-time offender for drunk driving, and they paid $159.
Wow. Okay.
I have been in court many times for people who have gotten DUIs and they are on their third or fourth one and they're basically getting a slap on the wrist in the state of Maryland. So we do have a court monitoring program at MAD, and we're trying to keep track of this and try to help us when we go lobby for in Annapolis, but we can only do so much without the support of them. So we're trying our best to get as many laws as we can to help support this.
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. Nicole Little asked a question in the chat. And she has a statement. Thank you so much to all the guests for being here today. We appreciate your dedication and your commitment to keeping our children safe. Nadia mentioned the goal of doing a presentation for the juniors and seniors next year. Does anyone know if the school has anything similar planned for this year? So Mr. Wusu, our principal, is out of town right now, so he cannot answer that. But I know from past conversations, the time frame was just a bit too short to have this in the school because they have to take the kids out for 45 minutes or so for an assembly, and that requires significant planning for the teachers and the faculty and so forth. So not this year. If we're able to do a shorter presentation of sorts, that may be possible. I will have to connect with Mr. Owusu, but there most likely will be something to be done next year instead of this year.
I will give props to Nadia. She tried to get it on the end of April. So she did try to get this a presentation. It just, like she said, it just didn't work out. So kudos to you for trying to attend.
Still trying, because I feel it's very, very important.
She did try, but
not giving up yet. but thank you for your question. If, say, there's more parents who are interested in this, we could advocate for like an actual assembly, but it's not going to be during the school time. It's going to be after hours. And it's most likely going to be about May or so. Now, with May being closer to the end time frame of the school year, that may become a challenge. Somebody had another question.
I will say we do attend health fairs. We do attend schools. So if you guys, we're even willing to, if you have your kid and you have like, maybe you can gather a group of kids with yourselves, we're more than happy to come out on after hours to speak to them if you want to, if nothing related to school, even if you just want us to talk to the kids themselves. So if you wanted to do that, and if we were more than happy to do that, as long as we get as much as we can out to the kids.
Thank you. And I saw Sergeant Field stated that the Alcohol Initiative unit from MCPD works with some of the other high schools and is through their health classes teaching each period block rather than an assembly. So I'll reach out. I'm going to the school on Thursday for the prom sales, from the prom ticket sales. So I'll inquire after that. But thank you. Again, this has been a learning experience for me personally as part of the PTSA. I'm just learning here how much parental involvement and how much advocacy is needed to be done at the high school levels and actually in all the levels of the schools. And so whenever I heard about this possibility of having MCPD present, especially Matt present at this kind of presentation, I jumped on the chance and I went, let's find a way to do this. If we don't have a lot of parents able to come on this night, we're going to record it so then parents can see it and families and teens can see it after the event is over. So again, I thank you so very much. It is 8:35. If we have any other questions, you're more than welcome to share it. You can share it to our PTSA email. I'll share this here, clarksburghighschool.ptsa@gmail.com, and then I'll share it out to Mothers Against Drunk Driving and to the MCPD officers if they're related to each one. And again, thank you again for joining us today, especially for this special presentation. This just all really reminds us of how important it is for after prom. I will personally say my student is not going to prom this year because he's a sophomore, he's going next year. And it was been a challenge, but this presentation reminds me of the value of our efforts and how important it is for us to have a safe and fun place for our kids to hang out when their prom ends. So thank you. And I hope you all have a great evening and great night. And thank you so much again. I'm going to end the recording.
Thank you, Nat.